Hello, welcome everybody. We're just waiting for a few others to join. We'll just wait another 30 seconds and then we'll kick off. Okay, so welcome everybody. Good morning. My name is Anna. I'm from Pan Software, the makers of Riskware. Thanks for joining us. We're excited to have you all here as we navigate what is a significant moment of change in the aged care sector. Highly complex industry, so we have brought together industry expertise and some practical insights to help you make sense of this evolving landscape. We'll be aiming to help you understand the current state of aged care in Australia, unpack new regulatory obligations, and finally show how technology might be able to support you to stay ahead. I want to start by thanking our presenters. I want to acknowledge and thank our presenters today. We're very fortunate to have such a high calibre of expertise in the room. Firstly, we have David Johnson. David Johnson is a customer success manager here at Pan Software with over 20 years of experience across strategic and operational risk, namely in the government sector. We welcome Paul Sadler. Paul Sadler has over 38 years of shaping aged care policy, governance and reform at the highest levels. Thank you, Paul. And we have, last but not least, David Warswick from LexisNexis Regulatory Compliance. David has over 20 years of experience as a health, law and compliance educator, writer and editor. Just very quickly, I'm just going to run through today's agenda. Paul Sadler will take over. Thank you, Paul. Paul will take us through the current state of the aged care system in Australia and MC today's webinar. LexisNexis will then discuss the new obligations regarding changes to the Aged Care Act and give us a bit more insight. And finally, we'll have David Johnson to show us very briefly how our software can help you. Post this, we'll have some Q&A. So please, in the Q&A section of the webinar, you're welcome to drop any questions in, and Paul will attempt to get through as many as we can before the end of the session at 12:15. Thanks, Paul.
Great. Thank you very much, Anna. Hello, everybody. And to my fellow presenters, the two Davids, who for ease I will refer to as David J and David W as we go through the exercise, because if I just call them David, it'll get very confusing very quickly. Okay, so my job is to give you a bit of an overview of what's going on in the aged care sector, really with the view to lead up to David W.'s presentation about your regulatory compliance obligations. So what we wanted to do today was highlight some of the reforms that have been occurring, to focus on what are the key risks for operators in aged care, and to then introduce the new regulatory compliance obligations that are coming into effect on the 1st of November with the new Act. Next slide, thanks, Anna. What I wanted to start with is just some statistics on Australia's aged care system. I suspect for many people online today or who watch this in coming weeks, you'll know very well some of the key statistics around the sector. But not everybody does, and not everybody might have focused on the most recent information. Next slide, thanks. To kick off, how many people actually use the aged care system in Australia? Well, it's over 1.3 million older people at this point in time. Around 200,000 of those use residential care. round about 300,000 use home care packages. And the largest single number by quite a long way provided support through the Commonwealth Home Support Program. Next slide. These numbers are expected to continue to increase substantially in the coming decades. The number of older people aged 70 years and over is going to increase by approximately 2.3 million over the next 2 decades. And the proportion of people aged over 70 who are actually aged 85 years and above will increase from 17% to 24%. This translates to residential care demand increasing by around 11,000 each year and home care demand increasing around 34,000 each year. When we look at the marketplace of providers in the sector, you can see that the number of providers has been falling in recent years. This reflects the pressures on the sector, financial and otherwise, which have led to industry consolidation occurring. And some of what we're going to be focused on today around regulatory compliance is another key driver of the consolidation that's occurring in the industry. And you can see here that the providers that provide multiple different types of care across residential care, home care packages and CHSP, there's 164 providers that do all three. But there's still a significant number of providers that only provide CHSP services, only home care packages, or only residential care. Next slide. So how much money is the government pouring into the aged care system at the moment? Well, it's around $36 billion all up. The majority of that, around 60%, goes to residential aged care. That makes sense because it's the service that is provided on a 24/7 basis. Home care packages have been increasing markedly in recent years and now make up over 20% of the government funding, and the Commonwealth Home Support Program is around 11%. Next slide, thanks. So what are the major reforms that are affecting aged care at the moment? Next slide. Well, the first thing to say is the reforms are a response to the Aged Care Royal Commission that sat from 2018 to 2021 and exposed some significant failings. The Royal Commission recommended that there should be a new Aged Care Act, and that this new act should incorporate a number of new aspects, including a statutory statement of rights, mandatory quality indicator program, the Aged Care Code of Conduct, incident management and reporting, and other things. David W. will be digging into these shortly. One of the other major recommendations of the Royal Commission was around the pay rates for people receiving aged care, providing aged care, the workforce. So we've seen the Fair Work Commission hold a work value case to examine the levels of pay that workers in the sector get. And we've seen the outcomes of that mean an increase of around 25% for direct care workers and somewhere between 3 and 6% for non-direct care workers. Next slide. The new aged care quality standards are due to come into effect on the 1st of November with the new Aged Care Act. So the standards very clearly place the older person and their rights and dignity at the centre of the aged care system. So you can see there standard 1 is around the individual. There's then standards around the organisation, and this standard in particular covers some of the key obligations that David W. will be talking about. The care and services are then standard 3. Standard 4 covers the environment in which the service is delivered. Standard 5 outlines clinical care responsibilities. Standard 6, which only applies to residential care, covers food and nutrition. And Standard 7 covers the residential care community. Next slide. These standards don't apply to all aged care providers after the 1st of November, unlike the current aged care quality standards. So you can see on the slide here that the government has set up a new system of registration categories. All providers will need to be registered to provide funded aged care and dependent on the types of service the provider wishes to provide, some of those service types will be exempt from compliance with the aged care quality standards. So the first 3 categories of service, covering home and community services, assistive technology and home modifications, and advisory and support services, will be exempt. Categories 4 and 5 cover the balance of home care services, and all home care package operators, as they transition into the support at home program, will have to be registered in at least category 4. And then category 6 covers all of the aged care quality standards. Next slide, thanks. So we're going to dig just briefly into what's happening in residential care, and then we'll have a look at home care. So in residential care, next slide please, the many of the reforms flowing on from the Royal Commission have already been put in place. So there were aged care building design guidelines released in the middle of last year. A new residential care funding model called the Australian National Aged Care Classification, or ANAC for short, was introduced in 2022. A hotelling supplement to fund additional expenditure on meals was introduced. Care minutes targets have been introduced in 2 waves since 2023. And in 2024, it became mandatory for all services to provide a registered nurse 24/7. There are a couple of reforms in residential care which will just kick off with the new Act on the 1st of November. These include the process for allocation of residential aged care places changes. So we don't have aged care approvals rounds anymore, and residential care will effectively be assigned to the older person in a similar fashion to how home care packages have operated since 2017. There is also a new financial and prudential management standard that applies. This doesn't just apply to residential care services, but also to services in categories 4 and 5 of the registration categories. And there are a couple of reviews happening. The government's actually announced the review of the accommodation supplement and accommodation pricing. And so that is happening now and due to report in the middle of next year. And they flagged, consistent with the Royal Commission recommendation, that they will look at refundable accommodation deposits in the year 2030. Next slide. So what are the home care reforms looking like? Next slide. Well, the big change, and this is the biggest change that's happening on the 1st of November, is that a new support at home program is going to replace home care packages. This slide is taken from the Support at Home handbook released by the department. It's pretty much the same slide outlining the design of the system that the department's been using for the last 3 years or so. So the government's thinking, while it's changed in detail, it hasn't changed in overall design. You can see on the slide, moving from left to right, that the older person moves through My Aged Care and the single assessment system. From the single assessment system, they can be referred through to the Commonwealth Home Support Program if they're assessed as having a lower level need. But if they need a support at home package level of services, they are assigned to one of 8 classifications that determine the funding. The budget is set on a quarterly basis. The care partner, formerly known as care manager, is responsible for establishing the budget and the service mix that the person is going to have their services delivered under. There are also 3 short-term pathways available. There's an assistive technology and home modification scheme, an end-of-life pathway, and replacing the short-term restorative care program, there's a restorative care pathway available. The provider is paid by the government, but there are also participant fees that will be payable by older people using support at home services. Those contributions from older people reduce the amount of the subsidy that the government pays. Next slide. With the Commonwealth Home Support Program, not so much is changing in the short term. The Commonwealth Home Support Program assessments are now conducted through the single assessment system that was introduced in December last year. The CHSP services are captured by the new Act on the 1st of November. All we have to do now is mute and unmute. You okay with that? Bit better. David J, you just need to switch off the sound. The service list has been standardised and brought into line with the service list that applies under the Support at Home program. But the government is going to take at least the next couple of years to be considering how it might move for the future of CHSP services and the funding models that it will use. So it's going to be looking at the balance between grants and individualised budgets, seeking to establish a common approach to pricing and consumer contributions across in-home aged care. Next slide. So when you consider all of this, what are the key risks that a provider faces in the aged care system? Well, when you look at home care, the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission actually released a report a couple of years back that summarised the top 5 risks from its point of view. They were organisational governance, care planning and assessment, clinical care, managing vulnerable consumers, and managing home care package funds. When you look at, and the way I did this one was to just put a search into ChatGPT and ask the question, what are the major risks in residential care? Because the Commission hasn't released a single report that summarises them in the same fashion as it has in home care. These were the 5 suggestions that AI makes. Resident abuse and neglect, inadequate infection control, environmental hazards, staffing, and clinical care. So the one common one between the 2 of them is clinical care, as you can see. Finally, I just want to make a couple of observations about implications for software systems, given we're supported on today's presentation by Pan Software's Riskware product. Next slide. So when you think about some of the challenges that a software provider has to consider, well, the first is the complexity of operating the different models of aged care. I've talked about the 3 major funding programs: residential care, home care packages about to transfer into support at home, and the Commonwealth Home Support Program. They're all managed differently. They all have different complexity around them. A second real challenge, and it's been no more evident than in the lead up to the 1st of November, the difficulties of shifting government deadlines and the lack of finalised details around business to government interface, particularly for claiming purposes. But unquestionably, there are huge opportunities. Aged care is a growth industry. I mentioned the growth statistics earlier, and that growth is going to be particularly apparent in the home care sector. There's obviously opportunities from the deployment of artificial intelligence that can be looking to drive efficiencies and improve accuracy and the effectiveness of care delivery. And the ability to seamlessly integrate across different platforms is a critical factor from the point of view of aged care providers. Okay, so that is my presentation. Hopefully that's given you a good overview of the key issues and where we sit at the moment. So before I hand over to David W. to talk from LexisNexis's point of view, I just wanted to remind people to be posting questions in the Q&A. We will have a Q&A session at the end, as Anna said, but I'll also be monitoring the Q&A live while the 2 Davids are presenting. So do feel free to ask any and all questions of us. But now to hand to David W. From LexisNexis.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Paul. A very interesting presentation. Next slide, please. Well, this morning I wanted to track some of the evolution of the new Aged Care Act legally, just so we sort of understand where it's come from and how important these changes have been over time. As you know, aged care is primarily regulated and funded by the Australian government, and it does so relying on a mix of constitutional powers. I think it might surprise you to know that the Australian government doesn't have a constitutional power over healthcare, and it doesn't really have a constitutional power over aged care. So I wanted to just make that clear, that we live in a federal system. There's a lot of sharing, as you know, between the Commonwealth and the states, but certainly at federation, the Australian government was given certain powers under the Constitution, and it can only make laws if it has a constitutional power to make that law against. And that's really just what I wanted to go through today. So in the initial draft, or the initial constitution that comes out in 1901, has almost no health powers. It does have a power over invalid and old age pensions, and it does have a quarantine power. That's essentially, as much as it has for quite some time. And so there's certainly no aged care going on in the sense that we understand it today. And it's really a system of charities, pensions, charitable organisations, payments to states to look after people. And that sort of continues pretty much from 1901 to 1945. And what's important about the end of World War II is that suddenly people are demanding that the federal government gets more involved in welfare and looking after people, and they put a constitutional referendum to the people in 1946, which is passed, and it gives the Commonwealth a new head of power over medical and dental benefits, pharmaceutical benefits, family benefits, unemployment benefits, medical and dental services. So this power is put into the Constitution in 1946. So it's the starting point for a modern system of benefits to start growing. And this is exactly what happens. So the Commonwealth Government in 1953 passes the National Health Act, which funds private nursing homes. And then it passes the Aged or Disabled Persons Care Act in 1954 to create hostels. So there has a system where they basically fund nursing care, which is a sort of high level care, and then hostels, which was perceived as a lower level care. And so this essentially is what the new system looks like. And it keeps growing like that for many years, the idea of funding nursing homes and funding hostels. And again, it's the Commonwealth funding things, not actually being involved with them. And so this regime is sort of continuing on through the 60s, 1970s. And over this time, there's a realization that the Commonwealth needs to have more legislative power. And so it looks into the Constitution and says, well, where can we find these powers? And it has to, as it does today, look for interesting powers in the Constitution that support aged care. So some of them include that social services power that I told you about that went into in the referendum in 1946. And it includes the power to grant money to the states, the defence power, which supports veterans' aged care, the corporations power, which allows them to regulate corporations that are involved in aged care, the treaty power, which allows them to sign treaties that bring in rights, and that's exactly what's happened in the Aged Care Act. They've drawn on international rights, and that's exactly where we're at. And of course, the modern act that takes advantage of these is really the Aged Care Act 1997, which is still the current act. And of course, the new act, which will take effect soon, as Paul said, is very much driven by the Royal Commission, which again was driven by, a four corners showing neglect and abuse. Next slide, thank you. So I guess what is new in the Aged Care Act? I think you can pretty much see what's there, and I think Paul has covered quite a few of those things, but I'll go through them in some order. The Statement of Rights, and I'll deal with that in a minute. It's very much a legislative statement about what rights people can expect to have if they're in aged care, and that's a good thing. There's increased, there are changes to the way people will access aged care services. And as Paul said, there's a single assessment system now and criteria for those clinical and non-clinical services based on need. And that was based again on a recommendation of the Royal Commission as well. There are new and updated funding rules. There are independent assessments that will replace provider reports. So that's new. And there are increased sort of co-contribution costs that Australians will be paying, I think, for those services. So that's new. The Support at Home program that Paul did talk about, that's again new. and it's going to be a huge feature of the system. We have aged care quality standards that have been updated, and that's also important standards on governance, clinical care, infection control, and nutritional needs and feedback management. And we have increased powers to the Aged Care Quality Safety Commission. They've got increased regulatory powers to oversee and monitor and manage providers. They will offer a lot of guidance. They've beefed up their website and what they are putting out. And interestingly, their new powers are actually based on the Commonwealth's Regulatory Powers Act, instead of the old Act, the 1997 Act, which had a suite of powers specially set up for that Act. But this time there's been a sort of consistency approach where they're going to just use Commonwealth regulatory powers that are already in an Act. So that's a change. We've got also the addition of the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Flexible Aged Care Program also being incorporated into the system as well. So a whole suite of changes. Next slide, thank you. Well, the aged care rules is something I do want to talk about, because on top of the Act, we have the rules as well. So the Act in section 602 does permit the minister to make rules, and they certainly have done this. The Act itself is about 600 pages long, and so are the rules. And the funniest thing was that the explanatory memorandum for the rules was 700 pages long. So these rules are significant. They're in their final form, and they're really important for providers and workers to understand, because they actually contain the day-to-day detail about what you need to actually implement your obligations under the Act. So I would urge you to realize that the rules are as important as the Act, and that they are legislative instruments. They are easier to change than an Act and can be updated on a more flexible basis, and they probably will be updated. This is the 4th iteration of them, the final form. So they provide additional legislative mechanisms to support what's in the Act. And the way they've designed the rules is that the chapters of the rules match up with chapters that are in the Act. So if there's a section of the Act, there's often a rule that will be roughly the same number as well. So they do provide a lot more of the detail about your day-to-day, provider obligations. So the enhanced obligations, the strengthened codes of conduct, the compliance framework, the registration models, and the funding guidelines are all in the rules. And the rules play a key part in the registration processes as well, which are updated again for this Act, which include things like mandatory registration. So it's mandatory from November the 1st for all providers of government funded healthcare and in aged care to be registered with the Commission. As Paul said, there are registration categories, and the Commission will look at applications for providers and assess them against capacity, capability, suitability, and risk. There are obligations based on the categories of how they basically deliver services. There's a certain transparency, there's a register that is there now, and so forth. So those are sort of key things that the rules do cover. So most of what you need to know in terms of the detail is in the rules, but the rules do work very closely with the Act, but they are substantial, and there's some good guidance on those, and we're updating our information about that. So next slide, please. Right, so as we mentioned, a key part of the new Act is really this statement of rights. And as Paul said, it's a recommendation that came from the Royal Commission. And this statement of rights is embedded in the Aged Care Act at section 23. And it's a very important part of the rights-based process that sort of puts that older person receiving care right at the center of this. And so the historic process in rights-based approaches was really just to concentrate on the rights of older people generally, Whereas the new Act and the new Statement of Rights emphasises the rights of users of funded aged care services. So not old people generally, but users of funded aged care services. And so they're very much changing that focus from a very broad one. And it is a rights-based approach. And as I said earlier, the Constitution allows the Australian government to sign international instruments and bring them into our domestic law. And that's where they got some of the powers to create some of the important parts of the Statement of Rights. So the Commonwealth Government has drawn on the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. They've drawn on the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and they've also drawn on the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. So within those covenants, which we've used the external affairs power to bring into domestic law through the Aged Care Act, you'll see some of those important rights that's included in the Statement of Rights. So that's where they've come from. So the 6 key principles are on screen. Obviously, independence, autonomy, empowerment, and freedom of choice is a key part of it. This idea that users of the system must have more choices wherever reasonable, I think, is a key shift. And I think most providers and workers know about that. The second principle is this idea of equitable access, that individuals have the right to equitably access culturally safe and appropriate assessments of their care, as well as palliative and end-of-life care when needed. They've chosen to use the word equitable access as opposed to simple access, because access simply requires, a passive focus on whether we should provide a resource, but equitable access requires a proactive shift for providers to actually have to make an assessment about whether something is actually usable and beneficial for that particular person. So that idea of equitable access, it's a rights-based approach that, lawyers in disability human rights law are very familiar with that, but it's just to remind you that there's been a change and it requires a more proactive approach, that equitable access. Obviously, quality and safe funded aged care services, person-centered communication, and the ability to raise issues without reprisal is a key part of the Statement of Rights. And also bringing in advocates and significant people and other people to to advocate for that particular person in care, should they not wish to raise that matter themselves. Okay, next slide, please. So to give legal effect to this Statement of Rights, because it's been put into the Act, Section 24 of the Act, which is the next section after the actual statement, is there to give legal effect to that, and it states that there are obligations for registered providers, that they must take all reasonable and proportionate steps to consider the Statement of Rights and to avoid unjustifiably limiting those rights. The Section 24 also requires workers and providers to demonstrate an understanding of the Statement of Rights and ensure they have practices to ensure compliance with that, and also provide the client a copy of that, which is also required under Section 155 of the Act and also in the rules as well. So those are kind of obligations on providers. And the rule is couched in a very legalistic term, which is understandable by lawyers, what's reasonable and proportionate. And of course, that will vary based on provider size and the nature of what's being requested and any reasonable limitations on that right, which would have to be quite well justified and relate to things like emergencies, equal opportunity law, criminal law, workplace health and safety, and things like that. And similarly, there are sort of also rights to complain about limits to the Statement of Rights that have been placed on a client. Interestingly, there's no legal right of redress permitted in a court or tribunal for a breach of the Statement of Rights. And that's been put into Section 24, subsection 3, that there's no legal right of redress permitted in the court for a breach of those rights. Okay, next slide, please. So, insights for providers about some of the significant new changes As I said earlier, there's probably about 6, 7 or 8 or so. The first one is obviously the delivery of funded aged care services. That has changed, and new guidelines, new formula, new details, and it's quite complicated. So residents will continue to pay a basic daily care fee. The government will pay all clinical costs, but there will be a means test system based on income and assets. And interestingly, if you want to know those details, they're in Chapter 10. This is what I was saying. The rules are really important. They're in Chapter 10 of the rules. So the aged care rules at Chapter 10 actually lay out very carefully what those criteria are. So I'd urge you to have a look at that because it is set out quite clearly at Chapter 10 of the aged care rules. The second aspect is workforce and aged care worker requirements. This is a very big issue, I think, for people working in the field. And there are worker screening requirements, as you know. Registered providers must ensure that aged care workers and their contractors have gone through all these screening requirements prescribed by the rules. So that includes police certificates, NDIS clearances, and sort of categories that these rules apply to. So not everyone has to have the full suite of these checks, but as you go through different registration categories, those checks become more and more important and so forth. There are certain criminal offences listed in the rules that would preclude someone from working in aged care as well. And there are also requirements if you later find out that a worker has fallen sort of foul of these rules, then you would have to make changes based on that as well. And these rules apply to not just you, but also people you hire to do your work as contractors as well. And so these rules are also added to the Aged Care Code of Conduct and also the Aged Care Quality Standards as well. And there are updated rules on incident and complaints management for the workforce as well, which are also in the Aged Care Act at Section 189, but they also apply to contractors as well. So a third aspect of change is the compliance with the Aged Care Code of Conduct, and that's important. The fourth one is provision of information. This is a key part of the new reforms, and it does talk about aged care providers providing their clients with statements of rights, information how to choose funded aged care services, and information about refundable deposits and all kinds of things. So there's a very large amount of provider sort of obligation around providing information. I suggest you search in the Act for the phrase information about in the rules as well, mainly in the rules. And I found 103 obligations that stated information about. So there's a lot of requirements to give out information. There are increased governance requirements around registration and those categories and accountability of organizations. More personal accountability as well, more due diligence and oversight regulation of boards and board members, and financial and prudential management standards, liquidity standards in certain categories as well. So those are all extra, requirements for organisation. There are some statutory duties, obviously, in the Act, and some of the key ones are at Section 179 to avoid adverse events, to not cause them, and you have to go through this legal sort of matrix or a mix to try and work out what is the likelihood of something harmful happening, what is the degree of harm that might result from this. This is very much a negligence sort of matrix. How could we avoid this? What would people, how could we suitably, can we manage this by, low cost sort of changes, things like that. So that mix is in there at Section 179. Section 180 talks about due diligence, that you must exercise due diligence in, your work and ensuring compliance under Section 179 as well. So those are two key statutory duties as well in the Act. Aged care quality standards, Paul's covered those. They're definitely important and have been beefed up. And the final one is really important, the whistleblower protections, these obligations on providers to maintain and implement a whistleblower system and make sure that people are trained. There's immunity for people who do want to blow the whistle, but it has to be done in accordance with the Act. The key sections are Section 548 through to about 551 of the Aged Care Act, which talk about keeping confidential those notifications, and also prohibiting victimization. Okay, next slide, please. We have in Lexis created new regulatory content to support these new aged care provisions, and I've listed those out and which are the ID numbers that we have for those. So you can have a look at those. Next slide, please. And basically, we here at Lexis Regulatory Compliance have an aged care module. We have sub-modules. We've beefed up the registered aged care providers module, which is a brand new one, and most of what we have that's new is going into those. We are updating that to incorporate new information about the aged care rules. We'll keep our retirement villages one as well, because that is state-based law, and most of the changes in the new act we put into the registered aged care providers module. Okay, next slide, please. So in summary, we do have material to cover these new changes. I think the changes are huge. We shouldn't fear them. They're designed for good. They are a work in progress. They'll take a long time to implement some of these things. I've listened to material from the Commission. I think they're looking to provide us understanding how complex it is, because it's complex for them as regulators as well. They are also under pressure, and they've said many times they're just looking to be fair and looking to see people doing the right thing, the clients at the centre. And I think there's a lot of good faith all round. And I think the key is to have a good look at the aged care rules and the guidance from the Commission, and keep up to date as much as possible. I think that's where, you know, the people who are here today can help you. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks very much, David. Really appreciate that. A very good overview. There has been one question just come in from Katrina, but I think we might move to David J's presentation first, and then Katrina will take your question first up in the Q&A session at the end. So, David Johnson, over to you.
Thanks very much, Paul. Look, before I jump into the demonstration, I just thought I'd like to introduce who we are at Pan Software. So we're the makers of Riskware. We've been proudly Australian owned and operated for well over 20 years, working alongside some of the country's biggest brands and government agencies to deliver smart, practical solutions in the GRC and safety management aspect. We believe that technology should feel intuitive, empowering, and make your work life easier, not harder. And everything we build has really been about, we've used the mindset really to use design, creativity, collaboration to make it easier and more insightful for you. Next slide, Adam. So ultimately, as far as the product goes, look, there are a lot of products out there. And I think one of the key points of difference for it really is Riskware looks to do both GRC and safety all within the one platform. Brings the two together in one integrated solution. It means you can manage everything from your risk compliance governance, also your health and safety programs, all in the same place with shared data, shared insights, and shared visibility of organizational profiles. The result is a system that captures the information, but it also helps you make better informed decisions on it. So what I might do is just jump in. So I'll share my screen. Fingers crossed. And so basically when you first jump into the product, and I'll just minimize this window for everyone here. Using that intuitive, easy sort of mindset, when you first jump in, everything is at the user's need. So right here, there's a notification center that tells you everything that you need to do in the system. You've got some charts and graphs depending on how you want to set that up, and you can customize what your dashboard looks like. So that's really easy and intuitive. So if you want to customize it, you'll have a library of visualizations that you can just turn on, turn off, and as you turn them on, they become available to you. With the menu, again, easy to use. Now what you'll see here is it's pretty straightforward for sort of users with privileges that see the detail that gets logged into the system. They'll have the various modules down here. But for most of those end users, so if we were to look at, say, incident reporting, when they open it up, everything is in a pretty easy and intuitive way to see it. So if they want to report something, so it's an incident of some sort, they click report I want to report something. And as they come in here, they'll see what types of reports that they can log. So for example, safety reports, whether it's compliments, complaints, feedback, clinical incident reports, or even SIRS reporting. So with there, they would simply click in, up comes the incident reporting form. They just go through, fill it out. And then obviously the workflow will take the rest into consideration. That will go through to the relevant people so they can manage it. As far as risk assessments, so as Paul and David have said, risk plays a big part in these things. So the risk register, when you go in, you'll see it's straightforward, easy laid out. Again, we've got 10 risks in here based on, what is the common risks across the industry. I know Paul touched on that at the beginning. So with each of these risks, you'll see all the information you need is readily available. If we look at one that was touched on several times about workforce and capability and those things, if you open it up, basically what you'll see is you have your risk, you've got your causes, consequences, controls, easy to use, easy to identify what's what things are impacting your ratings, and so forth. But I think probably given the content of today, one of the key areas of focus is also our compliance module. So if I jump into the compliance module, what you'll see is it's pretty straightforward as far as how you navigate around. We've got a series of obligation sets in here. And again, with our partners, LexisNexis, if you were subscribed to their services, we can easily ingest that information as well. So you would just click on integration, you would select your provider, so LexisNexis, put your user ID and password in, and then you can basically just consume all the various groupings of obligations that you subscribe to under LexisNexis. Once they come in, so you'll see, if we look at registered aged care providers, you just need to click into it. And then what that will do is bring up all your obligations, sub-obligations, all of them in an easy to sort of manage area. So if we were to, again, I think what I've taken away from this is when it comes to, registered aged care provider, the amount of compliance obligations is huge. And what you need to do is find a way to easily manage all those things. So if we look at these things, and I'll again use the aged care workforce model, we've got what is this obligation under here. I can see where it sits. I've got the description, what is required of it. And again, there may be things underneath that you need, and we can look at that. Registered providers must ensure aged care workers have appropriate qualifications, training to deliver high quality care services. In order to manage this, all I need to go in and say, I want to manage this. Am I compliant, non-compliant? If I put non-compliant for any particular reasons, let's say we've had staff shortages, I can list that as okay. I'll put that in. If I've got any evidence, I can put that in there as well. I'll see that that's also non-compliant, but I might say there are things that I need to do to make this compliant. Again, I can create tasks. So if I, from here, just go create a task, what you'll see is I can enter the task. So what have we got to do? Who's going to be responsible by when? But also, we also have AI supported. So what that means is we have the ability to go, what would we need to do to ensure that we comply with this? We can ask Riskware's AI, Socrates, and it'll recommend what you can do as far as this goes. So we might say, ensure all aged care workers have the necessary qualifications, provide ongoing training, development, select which one you want to quickly do. It'll bring that into what the task is. We can assign it to a responsible person. I'll use myself in this case. When is this due by? And again, due dates are very important. So I'll just say towards the end of the month, I'll say, okay. What then will take place is, you can see I've got two tasks in here. One is assigned to myself, one to another party. And again, as you work through these and make these compliant, you'll get an overall compliance score. The other thing too is we have a raft of things down the side here. So for example, a compliance map. Now this is very busy because there is a lot in there, but you'll also see the items are color coded. So whether you're compliant, non-compliant, what is linked with what, you have a compliance calendar. So where you've got obligations that sit at different times of the year, you can see where they sit and when you've got to do those. Additionally, what we have is we've got the ability to link to our risk module. So that's, again, very straightforward. So if I hit new link and I was going to search, I could always search workforce, and I can see two listed risks here, and I'll use this one. So if I choose to link it, I'll link it. And again, it makes reference, making it one integrated platform where all your information is stored. And again, if you've got specific incidents that have taken place, you can also link incidents. We've made reporting very easy as well. So we have a compliance report. Just by clicking on it, it'll consolidate everything that's taking place in that compliance landscape. So I'll just open it up. And if we look at compliance against our registered aged care providers, you'll see table of contents, how many haven't started, how many are in progress. This makes reporting up to boards, executive committees, those types of things very easy as well. So the last thing I wanted to say is, yes, you can put tasks in, everything managed in the system, but it also makes it very easy. And the reason I say that is because everything that's assigned to you as a user in that system, whether it does come from our incident module, risk module, compliance module, for the end user, they just go to my tasks. They'll see what task they have to perform, and I'll see one here. This is what it is. If I want to update that, I can. If I want to see where did this come from, I can see where did it come from. It'll show me the compliance details, description, any practical guidance that's provided with it. It's all there. So what I'll do is I'll stop sharing my screen. And if we can go back to the item, ultimately, the last thing I wanted to say about it is to make things even easier for our aged care sector, we've developed this purpose-built package designed specifically for around the needs of the challenges you face every day. The out-of-the-box solution comes pre-configured with everything you need, from incident management, compliance, risk management. We've done all the heavy lifting so you can get up and running very quickly as well. The goal here is really to help aged care providers manage governance, risk, and safety efficiently and effectively. That's enough from me.
Great. Thank you very much, David. That, I think, is a very clear presentation, and hopefully it's given people online a good sense of practically what does it look like to manage these compliance risks. So, David W., I might go to you first and just pose Katrina's question to you. I hope you've had a chance to have a look at it while David J. was presenting. So Katrina asked, in what ways do the regulatory changes enhance oversight, reporting and accountability of aged care providers? And what measures have been put in place to ensure adherence to these new standards?
Yeah, thank you, Katrina. Good question. It's definitely I think the whole process has arisen out of that desire to make all those changes exactly for that reason, to enhance that oversight. And at the heart of it, I think, is empowering the client. I think that's the first part of it, is to suddenly say, well, this client is responsible for a lot of the oversight is going to come from the client, because the client now has rights that are statutorily, there in Section 23. They know they have these rights, and these rights lead to requirements to give more information to the client or to the advocate. And from that, more questions will come from that. There'll be more complaints and things like that need resolution, and the whole system requires that resolution through the client. So the client empowerment, I think, with the information rights and advocacy, is going to generate a lot more oversight already. There's increased protection for whistleblowers so that people can speak up. There's this culture now that people can speak up and complain about things, and that's been increased as well. Increased aged care standards. The standards have been tightened as well, and increased powers to the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission as well. That's been a noticeable increase in their powers, and they've been linked now to the Regulatory Powers Act of the Commonwealth House. So it's a much stronger suite of powers that are available to the Commission for enforcement as well through the courts, if they need to. And a new complaints commissioner has been set up as well. So everything is designed around increased oversight. There's certainly more reporting and I think more accountability. And the way that they do that is really through the registration processes. So I think when they look to register, an organisation, they are very much looking at a new risk management perspective. They're auditing that person, they're checking intelligence about and reports about that, and everything feeds into that. And this is an ongoing process as well. So all complaints and things about organizations will go into the system, and when they come to re-register someone at the end of that 3-year registration process, or so that will be looked at as well. So the Commission has enforcement powers and new powers to create undertakings, education, look at the suitability of providers, all those sorts of things, and requirements to respond as well. So lots of those things are there. There are increased penalties. There are penalties for workers. There are penalties for organisations, and more standards, more duties. And so that's the short
and
answer.
also compensation pathways now made available, importantly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So Michelle has asked, are the regulatory updates expected to impact funding models and financial management within aged care facilities? If so, how? I might have first crack at answering that one, Michelle. The short answer is yes, absolutely. They will have an impact on financial management within residential aged care. And more broadly onto the home care sector as well. I think the financial impact is going to be twofold on residential care. As I mentioned up front, many of the major residential care reforms have already been put in place. So things like the AN-ACC funding system, the care minutes targets, and they're probably driving the major financial impacts on the sector. The remaining reforms that are coming in from the 1st of November will have a more limited impact, but still an important one. And I mentioned, and David did too, the financial and prudential management standards, including the new liquidity standard. The government is outlining for the first time a minimum liquidity level that it expects to see providers maintain. That's made up of 3 factors. You've got to hold 35% of your quarterly kind of operational budget in cash or equivalent terms. You've got to also hold 10% of your residential aged care refundable accommodation deposits in cash or equivalents, and you have to hold 2% of any retirement village deposits that you hold. So this will be a new threshold that providers have to leap over. The Commission has said that its analysis is that many providers already hold that amount of cash or cash equivalents to pass a liquidity standard. But the reality is for many providers, they wax and wane. And their demands differ depending whether they're building new buildings or have got other major, cash outgoings at particular times. So managing cash flow will be very significant, I think. Just a question, perhaps for both Davids. David J's presentation highlighted how Pan Software's developed Riskware to implement and manage the process of regulatory compliance, including building off LexisNexis's compliance work. I just wonder if both of you could briefly comment on what the major advantages of going with both LexisNexis and Riskware's approach versus other people who might offer things such as poor little consultants like me who might help providers try and manage their policy sets, for example. What are you offering through the two modules that you're both providing that carve out a space that's different from what more typical risk management approaches might be? David J, do you want to go first, and then David W?
Look, I can most certainly go first. I mean, ultimately, and David W will forgive me, the product itself is set up to allow you to easily manage compliance. As far as getting the compliance obligations and the things that you need to, those requirements into the product, you can put that in any number of ways. The beauty of going with a provider like LexisNexis, where you have a subscription, is they've already got all of those things all together. Now, I'm sure David will probably speak more in depth about how that takes place and everything else. As a software company, though, it's been really easy because where clients have those subscriptions, it does mean that they're plug and play. You've got that subscription, you just put your credentials in, and essentially everything that you are being provided can be put into the product. And what the product does is allow you to then, you've got all the information, but then you can use that information and manage all your obligations to ensure compliance.
And that was basically the short demonstration you did, showed how people could actually do that.
Correct.
Yeah, great. David W, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'd echo what David just said. I think the way we look at it is we monitor what's going on in the we already have material there, and we're monitoring new material coming in from 6 states, 2 territories, and the Commonwealth government. So we've got a lot of people turning out law all the time. We get those alerts, we have a look at them, we really work out whether they need to be updated for our clients in our material, and that material shows exactly what they need to do to comply with these rules. We have practical guidance and compliance links so that they can go further and have a look at those things as well. We have links to that as well, and they link out to those obligations and sub-obligations. We've created a brand new sub-module to take account of all of these changes, and we're still tweaking and updating that around the new rules. We've got an organization that has the capacity to find this new information quickly, draw it to the attention of people like me who curate it and work out whether it needs to be added, and then it can go through to Riskware as well. So I think those are the kind of things that we would see as advantages. We have a lot of resources that can gather this material and bring it together quickly, and the expertise to do it. Thanks very much, both of you.
There are no more questions come through, Anna, so I might hand back to you to wrap up and talk about next steps from here.
Thank you, everybody. That brings us to the end of today's session. Thank you all for joining, and a very big thank you to Paul Sadler, a very big thank you to David Warswick, and thank you to David Johnson. We have a screen up if you'd like to get in contact with any of the presenters or the presenters' companies, and we'll also send you an email with how to get in touch with everybody. Thank you all.